Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Glad to see everybody here today. To continue on our negotiations here, I have emailed to you the City of Corpus Christi's package proposal, which is its last best final offer. This encompasses 9 components, which include 6 of the outstanding articles that were still at issue, 2 tentative agreements that need to be, that we're requesting to amend, that we had previously talked about, and the TAs as a whole. This package proposal is presented as a whole and is not piecemeal. It can't be taken apart, it's all together. And it includes, and I'll go through each of these after I list them out. Article 33, Emergency Medical Services. Article 12, Overtime. Article 10, Base Wages. Article 11, Supplemental Pays. Article 9, Association Rights. Article 13, Appointment of Deputy Chiefs and Assistant Chiefs. Article 28, the impasse procedure. Article 4, Duration. And number 9, all other current tentative agreements. We'll go ahead and start on Article 33, Emergency Medical Services. Did you receive all that? Are you able to pull that up?
Hang on 1 second.
Okay. Before I go into the specifics of Article 33, Emergency Medical Services, I do want to point out that there's an additional article that's out there. It's Article 2 Definitions. I didn't include it in our package proposal because so far we've kind of just have a running list of what we need that's very agreeable, and there's nothing controversial about that. And we can work that out depending on what we do with the proposal we have here today. We just need to kind of go through and see if there's any other definitions we need to include in there. But that's what I'm saying is the definitions is pretty much a non-issue on our end. Okay, are you ready to go?
I am.
Okay.
You're going to do 33 first?
Yes. Article 33, Emergency Medical Services, is a critical part of the fire department city operations. As you know, we've talked that it's a large percentage of the response calls that are made by the fire department and the firefighters. What we've done on the certification requirements is Section A is basically status quo for the people that were hired before May 31st, 1985. And that includes a small number of people. On Section B, firefighters hired after May 31st, 1985, on obtaining certification, there's a change here from what we have previously talked about, namely because Del Mar, the fire department works in conjunction with Del Mar in order to get our firefighters trained through a firefighter academy, and so that they can get certified EMT and paramedic and be sworn firefighters. And through that they have to go through the state, and the state has a sponsoring agency, which is the national, I don't remember the full name, but it's referred to as the National Registry. But at any rate, Del Mar is going through an accreditation process to get this class accredited. It's accredited almost everywhere else, as I understand it. And so the accreditation requirements are adding additional elements to the academy, and additional hours, additional skills, things like that are going to actually make this course kind of a 2-year course. So in taking that into consideration, our current contract right now states that somebody has to, a cadet has to obtain their paramedic certification within 18 months after being first hired with the city. Well, the problem is now that if the class goes through the accreditation process and we follow the requirements, we don't want to contract people out of something that's impossible. So, in meeting with Del Mar, if everything goes perfect, they anticipate that the full class would be 21 months, including firefighter and paramedic, as I recall. And then they wanted to have, and that's if everything goes perfect, with scheduling clinicals, having people pass their tests, etc. So we've taken that 21 months and then integrated a kind of a buffer for scheduling conflicts, allowing people to retake tests, etc. So that's where that 28 months comes in.
Okay.
And that's something new that kind of just popped up this last 2 weeks. We would have had to be talking about this anyway, but we just got notified by Del Mar and we just had meetings with them last week about this. So that's why that's changed to 28 months. We want to be able to, we don't want to basically contract our cadets out of becoming firefighters, okay? And we were just kind of following in line with the requirements of what the Del Mar's going to require of the Fire Academy. On maintaining certification, there's 2 categories under that, and it's firefighters hired prior to October 1st, 2006, and firefighters hired on or after October 1st, 2006. Firefighters hired prior to October 1st, 2006 must maintain their paramedic certification for a minimum of 8 years as a condition of employment, and thereafter may relinquish their certification provided in the next subsection that has limitations on it. Any time period without certification will not count towards the minimum 8 full-year requirement. Absent mitigating circumstances, failure to recertify within 12 months after losing a certification shall constitute grounds for a discharge. On the next category, it's firefighters hired on or after October 1st, 2006. Absent exigent circumstances, which we consider illness, injury, military leave, things of that nature. Firefighters hired on or after October 1st, 2006 must maintain paramedic certification for the entirety of the tenure in the department as a condition of employment. Failure to maintain paramedic certification will result in discharge.
So this is a new requirement for firefighters hired between October 1st, 2016 and September 30th, 2015, who were told when they hired on that they must maintain paramedic certification for 8 years, after which they could relinquish it. How many people are you now placing this discharge requirement on?
Well, there is I believe that includes about 110 firefighters approximately.
So 110 firefighters that were told throughout their
Firefighter
careers.
2, actually, that's only limited to Firefighter 1s and Firefighter 2 EMS. That does
Okay.
not include captains and above, etc.
I mean, the
Well, and
proposal
let me-
includes them.
Right, the proposal includes, I'm
Yeah.
telling you, the number that I have available right now is, I'm talking about Firefighter 1s, Firefighter 2s. And I was actually going to start explaining that before you asked the question.
Okay.
This is different than what these firefighters that were hired on or after October 1st, 2006 had. At that point, you're right. In the old contract, they were required to maintain their paramedic certification for a minimum of 8 years, and then they were able to relinquish that. There's a negative financial impact that comes along with that. They lose their paramedic certification, etc. They don't get to ride ambulance. They don't get the ambulance assignment pay, things of that nature. And the thing that a lot of the firefighters used this for was to be able to get relief to get off of the ambulance, because as you know, in the old contract, Firefighter 2 EMS don't have a way off the ambulance or get a way off relief off the ambulance other than actually there's no way off the ambulance at this point for Firefighter 2 EMS. So this was
Unless they drop their certification.
Unless they drop their certification, right, which includes, you're right, unless they drop their certification, which would be a negative financial impact on those Firefighter 2 EMS, which is a significant impact.
It is, and they know that
Okay.
when they make that decision.
Right.
Right. And so when you would feel like a firefighter would have to have pretty good reason to want to drop certification knowing that financial impact.
Right.
And so you would anticipate that few would do that.
Right, and
But
that
you
has been the
want-
practice.
But
Well,
your final offer, well, let me finish. Your final offer is to take that right that they've always had away from them and to keep them on the ambulance without any recourse to get off.
well, no, that's not true, because this particular requirement is made in conjunction with the rest of this proposal, which
Okay.
now includes a way to get relief from the ambulance for these certain firefighters without having to give up their paramedic certification, without having to suffer a significant negative financial impact, okay?
Okay.
So that's why we're doing this. If we look at this piecemeal, if you look at just this one provision, you're not looking at the entire context of what we're doing. We're not taking away something, we're actually making it better so that you don't have to drop your paramedic certification in order to get relief. And so that's why we put this in here, because now when we go down into the section with regard to limitations on riding the ambulance, we've come up with a system that we believe will allow relief while still having the firefighters able to keep their paramedic certification that they worked so hard to get, which is now going to be a 2-year endeavor in order to obtain it.
Yeah.
And
just so I'm-
maintain the economic benefit from maintaining their paramedic certification.
Just so I'm clear, which members of the fire department have been consulted in coming up with this system? In other words, your proposal today, you've got an alternate relief system that you're gonna present to us. Which members of the fire department participated in that and told you they believe that that will work as a viable alternative?
Craig, you're asking me,
I just wanna know, was it the chief, was it the deputy chiefs? I mean, give me some names.
I have, why do I need to give you names when I have my team?
I'm taking this back, this is a final offer. I've gotta take this back to my membership for a vote. I want them to know who they can go talk to about why this is a good deal for them within the fire department.
The fire administration was involved in this.
Every
yes.
single person in the fire
We
administration.
had the fire operations chief, which was consulted, the fire chief and the deputy fire chief,
Okay, good, thank you.
okay? So yes, on the requirement for paramedic certification, we are, for firefighters hired after October 1st, 2006, they now must maintain their paramedic certification.
Upon threat of discharge.
Upon threat of discharge.
And I assume that
but
if they lost their paramedic certification, you would not even give them a hearing, that they would just be discharged automatically.
Well, it says absent exigent circumstances, okay?
And so you would agree with me that an arbitrator could determine exigent circumstances, or a hearing examiner?
Possibly, yes.
Okay. Okay.
On relinquishing certification, this kind of goes into the, explains the certification requirement. Section A is, again, 2 categories. Firefighters hired prior to January 1st, 2006, who have maintained paramedic certification for a minimum of 8 full years are not thereafter required to maintain their paramedic or EMT certification. On the second bullet, commencing October 1st, 2017, firefighters who were hired between January 1st, 2006 and September 30th, 2006, and who have maintained paramedic certification for a minimum of 8 full years and are not thereafter required to maintain paramedic certification. However, they must maintain certification at the EMTB level or higher for the entirety of their tenure in the department as a condition of employment.
Do you know how many people were hired during that 9-month period?
Let me think. I have that number, I just don't recall it.
Okay. Just maybe you can shoot me an email or something and let me
Yes.
know what that number is.
on time period for recertification. A firefighter 2 EMS who fails to maintain paramedic certification will be temporarily reassigned to firefighter 1 duties immediately upon loss of certification and will have 90 calendar days from the date he or she lost certification to recertify. A firefighter 2 EMS who was hired prior to October 1st, 2006 and who fails to recertify within 90 days will be permanently demoted to the rank of firefighter 1. However, the firefighter will retain any seniority earned in the firefighter 2 rank and will be eligible for promotion to firefighter 2 EMS if he or she thereafter obtains recertification as a paramedic. So this is the group that has the minimum requirement of 8. For the next group that must maintain their paramedic certification, it says a firefighter 2 EMS who is hired on or after October 1st, 2006 and who fails to recertify within 90 days will be discharged.
You're reading that item number 5.
That was 4A.
Is that not sufficient? Steve is asking me a question about they only have 90 days to recertify.
I guess my question is, guys hired before October of 2006 is given 12 months to regain certification if they lose it. Those hired after October 1st of 2006, if you lose certification, you're only allowed 90 days to regain that certification.
For a firefighter 2 EMS.
It's still paramedic certification, whether it's a 1 or a 2. You lose certification, it's your paramedic, it's not your rank. You get demoted to a rank of firefighter 1,
Right.
but after 90 days, you're discharged.
Yes, and I checked and it's reasonable to obtain your recertification within 90 days.
For a 2-year program? It's
No, that's the Cadet Fire Academy. The Fire Academy Cadet program is a 2-year class.
But
Is that,
Well, yes it is, but to regain your certification, once you lose your certification, you have to submit hours, you have to go back in for skills testing, and you have to go back in for written test.
yes. And I consulted with Del Mar and they say that is absolutely doable within 90 days for a recertification.
Well,
Was the
best case
representation to me, yeah. And they said, no, that allows time, a little bit of buffer time as well, as they put it. So, and that's the representation I had from them. That's what the information I'm relying on for that 90 days. And that's what, that 90 days was previously in the contract as well for recertification.
Did they say how often they give tests here locally?
They did not.
That's something to probably ask. A lot of times you have to travel to other cities to take tests.
Let me look at something very quickly. Another thing I'd like to point out, Steve, on that is a firefighter has the 12 months, that's only under the exigent circumstances. And this doesn't require, on the firefighter 2 EMS with the 90 days, doesn't require exigent circumstances, so they have 90 days to
So
get
9
that
days
back.
even for the firefighter 2 hired before, without any.
Right.
And I think you really need to ask the question about the testing schedule, because those are not held every 2 weeks, every 30 days, or even every 60 days. They're scattered by quarters.
Okay, and I'll ask about that, and if, our intent is not to contract out, say, we're giving you 90 days, do it, whether it's possible or not, that's not our intent. What I was represented to by Del Mar is if somebody needed to be recertified, that they would very well be able to do it within the 90 days. Because if you go past a certain time, then you have to redo the entire class or something
Right.
like that, so.
The amount of hours you have to put in could
Right.
change.
Right. Okay. And on that 4, it shouldn't be section 8, it should just be part of it. I don't know why there's a section 8. There's only one part of that number 4. Any other questions? Can we move on to the next, number 5?
Any more questions about Article?
Number 4? No, I'm just going over the section.
Okay.
I still have to finish the article.
Yeah.
Number 5, the participation requirement, except as provided by subsection 6 below, which is the limitations that I was referring to earlier when we were talking about paramedic certification. All firefighters in the ranks of Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2 EMS will be required to participate in ambulance rotation as a condition of employment if they are certified paramedics and they are currently participating in ambulance rotations on the effective date of this agreement. Absent exigent circumstances, failure of these firefighters to participate in the ambulance rotation without the available limitations provided for in this agreement will result in discharge. And then we go into the limitations.
Mm-hmm.
For firefighter 1s, commencing on October 1st, 2017, firefighter 1s hired between June 1st, 1985 and September 30th, 2006, who have maintained paramedic certification and participated in ambulance rotations for 16 years may request in writing to be removed from the ambulance rotation and thereafter be assigned to ambulances only during staffing shortages, increased operational needs, extreme conditions, or emergencies. The granting or denial of this request is at the fire chief's discretion. Now, this is for firefighter 1s. The determination of staffing shortages, increased operational needs, extreme conditions, and emergencies is not grievable, as that's maintained as a management right under our management rights article. And the fire chief may also temporarily deny such request by declaring a moratorium as allowed in section 5 of this article. And that's for firefighter 1s that fall under that section that have a minimum requirement of 8 years paramedic certification. Firefighter 1s that must maintain their paramedic certification. So commencing on October 1st, 2017, firefighter 1s hired on or after October 1st, 2006 who have maintained paramedic certification and who have participated in ambulance rotation for 20 years may request in writing to be removed from the ambulance rotation and thereafter be assigned to ambulances only during staffing shortages, increased operational needs, extreme conditions, or emergencies. The granting or denial of this request is at the chief's discretion. This is the firefighter 1s still. And the determination of staffing shortages, increased operational needs, extreme conditions, or emergencies is not grievable. The fire chief may temporarily deny such request by declaring a moratorium is allowed in section 5 of this article. So currently, our firefighter 1s can ride the ambulance for 8 years, and then after 8 years say, I'm not going to ride the ambulance anymore, and we cannot utilize them anymore. Our firefighter 2 EMS have no way for us to relieve them other than dropping their paramedic patch, which is a significant negative economic impact on them. And that's, you know, what we have done is we're trying to switch those roles, because the firefighter 1s, firefighter 2 EMS, by their rank structure currently, promote up to ride the ambulance. That's one of the big differences between firefighter 1s and firefighter 2s. Firefighter 1s are usually used as relief for firefighter 2 EMS, number one, for training and to help with the ambulance rotations so that we can spread it across a little bit more evenly. What we're doing now, and as you recall, what we're doing now is now when we go into the firefighter 1, 2 EMS, you're going to see that I'm giving that now what we're presenting is a relief off of the ambulance. For firefighter 2 EMS, commencing on October 1st, 2017, a firefighter 2 EMS who was hired between June 1st, 1985 and September 30th, 2006, has been in the firefighter 2 rank for at least 13 years may request in writing to voluntarily demote to firefighter 1 and be assigned to ambulances only during staffing shortages, increased operational needs, extreme conditions, or emergencies as determined by the fire chief and or the city. So they become a second tier kind of relief. You're basically gonna be called if that's the last resort, that's the last group of people that are gonna be looked at. The determination of staffing shortages, increased operational needs, extreme conditions, or emergencies is not grievable. The fire chief may temporarily deny such request by declaring a moratorium as allowed in section 5 of this article. So this is an election. The only way the fire chief can temporarily deny the request is by the moratorium that we'll be talking about in section 5 of the article.
Is that
Go ahead.
true? I mean, the fire chief can declare a staffing shortage, increased operational need, extreme conditions, or emergency. And if he does that, that's not grievable, and that's in addition. So he can deny the request at first, and that's in addition to his ability to declare a moratorium, right?
No, on firefighter 2 EMS?
Yeah.
No, what firefighter 2 EMS, it's an election.
But it says, I'm
Right.
looking at
When they're
B2.
called, basically, when it's saying what's not grievable is if the chief says, hey, I've got a staffing shortage and I've already exhausted all my firefighter 2 EMS, all the first line firefighter ones that are, that can ride the ambulance, you're the last resort, I need you to come in, whether it be a daily staffing short, like for one day, or if it's if there is a significant staffing shortage that is predictable and that's evident, hey, I'm gonna rotate you maybe like once, kind of rotate and rotate you on the ambulance, etc. The callback, the determination of the callback is what's not grievable.
Well, if the chief just declares a permanent staffing shortage, that decision is not grievable, right?
That would have to then be a moratorium.
Well, not as I'm reading it. To be assigned to ambulances only during staffing shortages, let's just stop there. So the
Okay.
chief says, okay, I hereby declare a staffing shortage, and it will be, and we will have a staffing shortage until I say we don't. That decision is not grievable.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, that doesn't
Well,
seem to be
not-
grievable. Yeah.
It's just not grievable. So he doesn't even have to declare a moratorium, he can just declare a staffing shortage, and we can't challenge that decision no matter how unreasonable it might be.
Right, but in practice, he's gonna have to utilize all the this is just for callback to ambulance duty. Once a firefighter 2 has elected to go back to be a firefighter 1 and be kind of the second tier, the last group of people that they look at in order to fill the ambulances. So he can declare a permanent staffing shortage, but if you don't have a staffing shortage on a particular day or on a particular week, then he won't have to call you. It's kind of a practical matter.
I
They're not gonna put
understand
people in
you.
the ambulances on purpose.
I understand what you're saying.
Right.
The contract language doesn't limit him like that. It just, he can declare increased operational needs, whatever that is, or staffing shortage, and he can use them as he sees fit, even if they've served their 16 years and rotated off. I mean, and lost that. I mean, in other words, I'm a firefighter 2 EMS, and I've done my 16 years, and I want to voluntarily demote to firefighter 1 and to be assigned to ambulances, so I've taken that economic hit. Now the chief just says, whoops, staffing shortage. Oh, increased operational need, so I'm sorry, I still gotta use you. And so he's taking the economic hit, but the chief can do one of those two things and say, now you gotta still be on the ambulance, and the firefighter has no recourse because it's not grievable. Right?
Right, but
Okay.
it has to be in those three instances. The intent was the intent of this article was so that was a last tier, the last group that was looked at, that you utilize all of the others before you get there.
Well, I mean,
And
16
let me
years, they're
tell
all
you-
gonna be graybeards.
Well, let me tell you the issue if the chief declaring a staffing shortage is grievable. That allows, we've talked about staffing before, and it's a management right. We're not willing to give up the ability to determine what adequate staffing is for the fire department here at the City of Corpus Christi. And if we were able if you were able to go grieve, hey, the chief declared a staffing shortage, we don't believe there's a staffing shortage, then indirectly, it's gonna go to an arbitrator, and indirectly, an arbitrator is gonna say, no, I don't think it's a staffing shortage, and it takes away the management right of the city that we've always had.
Roxy, that argument's a non-starter. Everything's a management right until you limit it by contract. I mean, setting wages is normally a management right. But what you've done here is you've created this staffing shortage, increased operational needs, and, the chief can even declare those things in bad faith, and the firefighter can't challenge it under this contract proposal as you've written it and presented it. And that's the problem. I've served 16 years on an ambulance. I have now decided to voluntarily demote. I've lost a bunch of pay, and the chief can just wave a magic wand, and I'm still on the box.
So what you're worried about is the good faith issue, not so much when the threshold as to when we can.
It is certainly one of my concerns.
Okay, so.
Certainly one of my concerns is that you've got, this one section has 2 get-out-of-jail-free cards. I can either declare a staffing shortage or an increased operational need. What that means is what I say it means. It's not grievable. If I don't want to do that, I can just declare a moratorium.
Okay.
That's not grievable either.
Let me clarify, and I'll clarify the language as necessary. The part, we don't intend to allow bad faith to happen and to go unchecked, okay? That was whatsoever not the intent. The concern was that we did not want to lose our ability to determine staffing as a management right. We didn't want to go on one arbitrator, one situation, and they say, you're gonna have to do this particular staffing. That's not what we're interested in. We're not interested in bad faith either. So the part that's not grievable is the actual determination and threshold of a staffing shortage, increased operational need, extreme condition, or emergency. I'm guessing what you're looking for is the ability to make sure that is in good faith.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll clarify that language. And that's on all of that, section 6, right? Because that.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, those become important. Those situations become important. Staffing shortage, increased operational needs, extreme conditions, and emergencies become important because that is only for on the callback issue. Okay. So I'll clarify it as to what I was saying. I'll send you one with clarifying language. Okay.
Okay.
As to what the intent was.
Craig, where does it say that only it's limited to the callback issue?
That what's limited to the callback issue?
The termination of staffing and increased operational needs. It doesn't say anything about that's dealing with the callback issue.
Actually, I think it is. They request to voluntarily demote and to be assigned ambulance duties only during staffing shortages, increased operational needs, extreme conditions, or emergencies. So that's when he can call them back to a duty they have relinquished, okay?
You all got 2 different.
But his
callback.
His determination of those triggering events is what's not grievable.
His callback is like callback on a different day. than
I'm
your
talking
staff.
about a firefighter 1 who's at station 7, who already decided not to be riding the ambulances. He's on shift that day, but now there's a staffing shortage, so now he has to go to medic 3.
Right.
That's not a callback. He's already on duty. That's, to me, that's what this says.
Well, I think you're using callback in a different sense than they're using it. I think what they're talking about called to ambulance duty.
Oh, call to ambulance service,
Yeah.
okay.
Call to, yeah, we're not talking
Being
about
assigned
callback and
to
overtime.
ambulances only during staff and charge.
We'll term it then call to ambulance
Yeah.
duty.
Okay.
Or assigned to.
You're an AT&T small business expert.
Okay, on, section 2, matters related to the failure to obtain and loss of certification. I think, as I recall, there was no significant change on this. This was, intended to maintain status quo.
Mm-hmm.
So there's really no new stuff there. On, section 3, assistant EMS director, I believe everything there was just clarified, to maintain status quo, is what I recall. We had that issue about, the promotion. And you
Tell
provided
me,
me with the
you
memorandum.
have added a sentence though, I'm looking at section 3C.
Let me look.
However, if the position is appointed from the rank of captain, the assistant EMS director may participate
Oh.
in the battalion chief assessment in order to become, does that mean eligible to become,
This is actually language from the old contract, just to clarify, because, you provided me that memorandum that clarified that, the intent of the appointment to an assistant, EMS director was so that they serve in a battalion chief rank, but they couldn't promote up to an assistant chief from that point.
so you just
But
mean.
it doesn't prevent them from being able to become eligible for promotion. So that's what that last
So they
sentence
can test
means.
for battalion chief.
So they can test for battalion
Okay.
chief whenever, if an assessment comes up. And so they can still promote from an assistant EMS director, but they must go through the promotional process that everybody else has to go
Written
through.
test, assessment,
Right,
all this.
and so that's what that last sentence means, and that last sentence was actually language taken from the old contract. We don't want to prevent them from being stuck there, okay?
Yeah, it says that.
It's a good question.
You're not trying to say in this subsection C, Johnny's concern is that, you're not saying that the assistant EMS director who was a captain before they couldn't test for assistant chief,
No,
No,
they
okay.
have to go through the battalion chief
through the battalion chief rank first.
assessment, obtain the battalion chief rank,
Okay.
go through the regular promotional process.
Okay.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah, because the
categorized.
next step would be, if you're a captain, the next step would be the battalion chief assessment, right? So that's what, they can go to the next step to continue to be eligible for promotion.
Okay.
So they would have to go through the same process everybody else goes through for promotional positions. Section 4, temporary reassignments of firefighter to EMS, nothing has changed there.
Yeah.
And on section 5,
Ken, you
I'm
know,
gonna
on
clarify
section
this.
4, temporary
Oh, sure.
reassignments,
uh-huh.
is that limited to firefighter 2 EMS? Can a firefighter 1, let's say in their 17th year, they can't get 2 pay periods off?
This was status quo from the old contract, so it was directed at firefighter to EMS. I hadn't thought about that. That hadn't been
Okay.
brought up.
Okay. Okay.
It's a good point.
And that would include a firefighter one who's included in a rotation at an EMS station?
Should.
It's the same as a firefighter.
I mean, a firefighter 1 who's regularly assigned to EMS,
They act as a firefighter to EMS, so that would apply.
okay,
Have we get the same
Mhm.
option?
okay. But maybe we ought to
Where does it say
clarify,
that?
it doesn't say it, but
It should clarify.
it,
It should.
we, that's a clarification you might be willing to make.
The duties are the same.
Okay. On section 5, and I need, before I go through it, I just want to let you know that the intent is the same as on the, because there's a part here that says it's not grievable. The intent is not to allow bad faith. It was specifically for the ability to maintain our management right with regard to those things, staffing shortages, increased operational needs, et cetera. So I'll be able to clarify that as well. But I just wanted to make that clear up front that we do not support bad faith decisions, okay?
Okay.
Section 5, and that's not the intent here, commitment to staffing needs. The parties understand and agree that the fire department must be able to adequately staff its ambulances at all times as determined by the fire chief and/or the city. If due to staffing shortages, increased operational needs, extreme conditions, or emergencies, the fire department cannot obtain adequate staffing, the fire chief can declare a moratorium on firefighter requests made pursuant to section 1B6. Such moratorium shall continue for a period necessary to meet staffing needs but may not exceed 30 months. The declaration of the moratorium is not grievable. And because we say that because the declaration is based on the determination of a staffing shortage or increased operational needs, extreme conditions, or emergencies.
Roxy, what they're asking is, let's say that somebody under a prior contract has already dropped his or her patch and they were hired after October 1st, 2006. You're not suggesting that this would apply to them, that they'd have
No.
to get recertified?
No,
Okay,
not at all.
okay.
No, the intent,
Is to capture the people that currently are certified, hired after October 1st, 2006?
right. If you have previously dropped your patch, or previously, before we started these before today, got out of your ambulance duty somehow or some way, our intent is to keep that, to grandfather that in.
Not to
Okay.
recapture them.
Yeah, we're just capturing the people who are currently have their paramedic certification, the people who currently ride the ambulance, et cetera.
And going back to 1B6, these limitations, how were these years, 16, 20, 13, 16, how were they arrived at?
They were arrived at by the need, looking at the necessity of staffing our ambulances over an average career period of 20 to 30 years of a firefighter. When you promote up to a firefighter to EMS, your job is to ride the ambulance. And that is 80% of our responses that we have to go to, or that we respond to. That's major part of our duties. So it becomes a problem when we have.
That's true, of course, whether you're on the ambulance or fire apparatus. People on fire apparatus also respond to medical calls.
You're right. I'm not saying that they don't, but they don't, and a fire truck usually gets there first, but sometimes an ambulance does too. And an ambulance a firefighter truck, fortunately, you've always been able to have a paramedic on there, but those are usually EMS, EMT people. And on ambulances, we need paramedics. And so a paramedic and an ambulance is always gonna have to be at 80% of those calls.
Go ahead.
Please
You
say
it.
something.
You say it.
Somebody's gotta say something.
Do y'all not know that we are, since 1992, have had a paramedic on every fire truck?
I understand that.
All the time.
That's why I just said that.
And how did we do that,
That's
Scott?
not the way it came out of your mouth.
Well, Scott, explain how we did that. With a deep breath, explain how we did that.
You know, I've explained this several times now. We were the second reasonably sized major city in the country to put paramedics trained to do everything that they can do on an ambulance on every fire apparatus in this city. There was only one other city ahead of us that did that. That was Seattle. Just 5-6 years ago, they started putting cardiac medications on the engine companies in San Antonio, Texas, that we had had on there for 15 years before they did. So to say that the paramedics on the ambulance, or to insinuate that the paramedics on the ambulance need to be more highly trained and guaranteed to be this, that, or the other
yeah,
is
I didn't say
ridiculous.
that.
No, you didn't, but it's insinuated.
I didn't insinuate that either.
Well,
All right, go ahead and finish, Scott.
Let me ask you a question. Is there any EMS call or emergency medical service call
mhm.
that an ambulance does not have to go to?
Yeah. They
That's
send
not
us
required to go to?
Yeah.
So there's EMS calls that you say,
Man
okay, we're
down
gonna,
calls.
we're
They
gonna
send the
you-
closest unit, whether it's an ambulance or a fire truck.
Right, but does an
About
ambulance get?
90% of those man down calls do not require any transport to the hospital. It's just to go out and check and make sure they're not dead on the side of the road.
So does the ambulance not get called out at the same time that the fire truck does?
No, the nearest unit goes, whether it's an ambulance or a fire truck, not both of them. Also, we do pickup calls, which some may or may not, some people may or may not consider those EMS calls, but they are, because we're checking on the physical welfare of the patient, of people. The fire trucks make all of those. And I can tell you that before the end of my shift tomorrow morning, I'll do at least 3 of those. And probably a couple of man down calls. So to say that the ambulance does so much more than the engine companies, 80% of our calls are for EMS related issues, yeah, and that ain't something new. And somebody downtown has tried to sell this issue that now our city suddenly has 80% EMS calls and 20% fire calls. That's BS.
2%.
It's always been that way.
Take a deep breath,
It's
sir.
been that way since I got here in 1985. It just so happens in the last few years, somebody decided they wanted to start using that as an issue. But it's always been that way.
Now, I'll try to add something to it. I am a firefighter too, EMS. Been one for 28 years. I ride the ambulance and the fire truck. I do just as much EMS work on the fire truck as I do on the ambulance. The only difference between the two is, on the ambulance, I put them in the back and take them to the hospital. But I do just as much EMS care on the fire truck. That is why this city's probably got one of the highest save rates in the nation. And we started that in the early 90s, as Scott was saying. So the guys that are riding those fire trucks are paramedics who are rotating over to the fire truck, whether it be for that shift or they've done so many years and they've elected to move over and become a full-time paramedic on a fire truck, which has always been a source of discussion here.
So as a firefighter to EMS, you ride the ambulance and the fire truck, is that
Absolutely.
correct? So you ride both?
As of the last 2 to 3 years, I ride the ambulance 80%
Okay.
of the time.
And you're telling me there's no difference other than just the transportation to a hospital?
Very little difference. The monitors are a little different, but we carry the same medications. We carry the same type of cardiac monitoring equipment. We carry the same bandaging and splinting equipment. You carry the same trained personnel. The difference is the ambulance puts them on a stretcher and takes them to the hospital.
Do you intubate from the back of a fire truck?
Yes, we
Well,
do.
not from the back of a fire truck, usually on the street, but yeah. we
So then
intubate.
why does everybody want to get off the ambulance?
I don't know that everybody wants to get off the ambulance, otherwise I'd be off of it already. It is
Well, I
a
know,
very
but you-
demanding assignment.
But it's the same, but you
Physically-
said that the fire trucks and the ambulance offer the same service and do the same thing other
Except
than
transport.
transportation.
I guess, and I'll add to the exception, is there's no paperwork on the engine company, the officer does the paperwork, which is trivial to me. The paperwork's nothing, it's just time consuming. Mental and physical wear and tear, it does take a toll. But you're right, it's very demanding on both sides.
Roxy, the thing is, when you're on the ambulance, that's all you do. You don't do any of the fire-related stuff. You don't
But-
You just do ambulance duty. And, you know, I would throw it back at you. If you think that, I don't know of any city other than Corpus Christi that's asking a firefighter to engage in 20 straight years of continuous ambulance duty. And you've got two chiefs here. If either one of them can tell me of any other city they know that imposes this kind of requirement. Every other city I know has a thing where you rotate into the box for a while and then you rotate off, and you're done. You know, this is the only city that's imposing this type of requirement. And
There are some cities that have standalone ambulance where it's required that that's all you do for.
Austin's a wonderful example of that. And you know what? Almost none of the employees of Austin Travis County EMS make 20 years. Almost none. They all quit.
But they were just on the ambulance. They didn't rotate off the ambulance and the fire truck.
Right, but as you just heard Steve say, lately he's been on the ambulance 80% of the time. It's not a 50 on, 50 off. It's 80% of the time. And
Steve, do you volunteer do you volunteer to take on extra shifts?
I'm assigned. In the past, years ago, I did volunteer because I like riding the ambulance.
Okay.
I'm an idiot, but I like riding the ambulance, and I like teaching you guys. I have volunteered on days that somebody said, you know what, I'm beat. I said, I'll take it for you.
Okay.
I got no problem doing that. But it also makes my firefighting side of it suffer. I am much more confident on the ambulance than I am on the engine company. Why? Because I do it most of the time. You put me on an engine company, I go into a fire, my skills are a little rusty.
So do you fight fires as well as a firefighter 2 EMS?
It is part of my assignment.
Okay, so you do fire and ambulance. You switch. You have days
Absolutely.
that you go on the ambulance and days that you go on the fire truck.
Absolutely, but you missed what I said. My duties as a firefighter suffer because of my extended time I spend on an ambulance assignment. So my more life-threatening events on an engine company become a little more life-threatening when I'm not as highly trained and experienced because I'm doing more EMS stuff on an ambulance. It is a little bit of an unnerving thing now for
But
me
you
to be in a
can't-
burning building.
But we can't control what the calls are. Is that right?
Sure, that's the
We
nature of our
can't-
business.
so
We
that's
can
the nature
control
of
how
our
much he rides
business.
that ambulance.
Yeah.
we're not really talking about controlling the types of calls. We're talking about
I was making a
adequately taking care of your people.
That's right.
And y'all feel like this proposal does it, and we feel like it doesn't, and we're just asking you to give us examples of cities where this type of model that you presented in this proposal works. You know, I mean, I can't
And
say it any
Craig, I
plainer
don't
than
even, I'm not quite
I
sure that
am.
that's a fair question, because you and I agree that Corpus Christi's system is unique. It's a unique system.
You know, medical
And-
care is medical care in Corpus or Austin. I hope they have relatively the same standards. What we're talking about is the toll that doing EMS work takes on your trained professional. And what I'm suggesting to you is that you're the only city that I know of, and I've got two chiefs in the room, they can contradict me. You're the only city that I know of that imposes this kind of time requirement of continuous service on the ambulance. And if there's another in Texas or the United States, name it to me. I'll stand corrected. But I'm not. And quite frankly, the problem I think that you have here is that people that aren't EMS and fire professionals and who don't understand the nature of the beast are dictating the decisions on your side of the table. That's the problem. You got non-EMS people deciding, saying things like, well, 80% of your calls, so that's 80% of your job. That's such a misinterpretation of the data. It's not funny. And it's not funny. And it's a problem for us. But I don't want to beat this horse to death. We've done this in several sessions. I understand your proposal. I want to get through all of your proposals, and then let's talk about where we go from here. But you're taking firefighters have some very important rights under the current contract that this proposal takes from them. I think you'll admit that. And, your answer is, well, it's the nature of our staffing
Well-
needs. And, so
I think that
I don't think that only one side should care about the welfare of the firefighters. Staffing needs or no staffing needs. Both sides should be caring about the welfare of the firefighters. And as I pointed out to you, and nobody's denied this yet, 2 of the top 10 EMS call stations in the country are right here in Corpus Christi. You have a very high volume of calls, you've got a burnout problem, and your response to that is, we don't want to give up our management
I don't-
rights.
You know, you still have not I know that you keep saying there's a burnout problem. I need to see information on that here in Corpus Christi. I know you've given me stuff from Austin, you've given me stuff from everywhere else. Is there information with regard to Corpus Christi? And let me tell you,
Tell
Craig,
me-
it's not that we don't care.
Tell me what you want to
We're
see. I mean,
trying-
you want me
we're-
to point to individuals and say, this person's broken, that person's broken, this person's burned out?
No, I just don't know if there's if you have any data that we can look at that would help us understand that.
Well, if you don't believe that it's a problem, and you see that there's an economic disincentive from dropping, your patch and all the pay you lose,
There's
why do you
not
think
very
the
many
problem
people
will?
that do it.
Right. So why do you think the problem will, become much more exacerbated if you leave us with the rights that we have now? What I'm telling you is
What
this.
you're asking.
If I'm on a trapeze and I'm going back and forth, I'm willing to be more bold and to stick it out if I got a net under me. I'm hoping I never need to use the net, but I know it's there. But now what y'all are doing is saying, keep doing it, do it longer, but we're taking away the net. If this does happen to you, if you do burn out.
Craig, I need to clarify a couple of things. We do care about our firefighters and their well-being on this side of the table. And that is why we're looking at this. And no, we're not taking away rights. We're trying to exchange things to fix the problems right now. Because as you have it right now, firefighter 2 EMS are required to ride the ambulance their entire career without any kind of way to get off other than to suffer an negative economic impact.
Well-
You're asking for
Change
rights, for some rights that you believe you had in the old contract,
That's right.
plus
But if
new
I'm reading-
rights
Yeah.
in order that I believe, and we believe, and we've evaluated them time and time again, that would not help the staffing of the ambulance problem.
Well, the staffing of the ambulance problem, I mean, we said this before, and I'll say it again, you didn't hire people for 3 years straight, and you have a staffing problem. You don't have just a staffing of the ambulance problem, you have a staffing problem, period.
Right.
You have the same number of firefighters attending to your fire needs that you did in the late 1960s, the exact same number attending your fire, and yet the population of the city has doubled in that time. So on the fire side, you have just the same number of people serving twice the population. So when you say we have an ambulance staffing problem, you have a staffing problem. It's a fire department-wide staffing problem. You're addressing that. You're adding 40 people right now. I think you're gonna hire another new class if you haven't already. And August, another, do you know how many yet?
40 is what
Another 40, so you got 80 people coming on board. That's gonna take care of the staffing problems, but you're still imposing these requirements. When it's a staffing cost problem, and you've taken steps to alleviate the staffing problem. So, it's hard, and when you say
So
we're not
you
taking
know-
rights away from them, you're requiring certification for life, and the only way to get off, if I'm reading this right, if they're hired after 2006, they're EMS 2, they gotta serve 16 years as an EMS 2. And that's double the requirement that is stated in the contract now. And even after 16 years, you still
But you
can
still get your
declare
economic-
staffing shortages, and you still can declare a moratorium. And we've given you really a 1-year moratorium on the front end, because it didn't start until October 1st, 2017. Roxy, I'm not trying to beat you up here. I'm feeling my folks' disappointment. I worked very hard to try and keep this pass from coming, but it's here. I really wish that, I'm gonna tell our troops, they tell me your deputy chief and your assistant chiefs came up with this, and that they feel like this is what's needed, because that's what you told me at the table. but you know, I've got my doubts.
I've said they were consulted. I didn't say they went and they came up with this. They were consulted in this, you know, I'm not gonna tell you how to run your team and who you're gonna talk to and how you're gonna come up with your proposals. We do our due diligence.
If you feel like I'm
do-
trying to tell you how to run your team, I apologize. That was not my intent. What I'm saying is simply that if they gave you advice that's contrary to this proposal and you didn't listen to them, then what that tells me is this was a proposal ultimately that was put together to people that don't really know the business. And that's regrettable, because we don't feel like this solves the problem. But, you know, it is what it is. You have made your proposal. You've indicated a couple places where you're gonna tweak it. Let's just get through the other proposals and see where we go from here.
Okay. The next on the list is, I believe, overtime, A12, Article 12. The issue on this particular article had to do with Section 2, hours worked. Our previous overtime pay was for hours actually worked over 204. It was a change from the old contract, which was scheduled hours. This one's a little bit different. It still requires, and I'll read it and I'll explain it. For purposes of determining entitlement to cycle overtime pay, any leave hours or Kelly days will not count as actual hours worked. That's status quo. This is the next. The next sentence is the issue that we've been looking at and discussing. For purposes, and that should be an S, I apologize. For purposes of determining entitlement to callback overtime pay, unscheduled vacation leave, unscheduled personal leave, and any sick leave hours and Kelly days will not count as actual hours worked. What does count, callback overtime, will be due for hours actually worked over 204 hours, including scheduled and approved vacation leave and personal leave. So what we're doing is we're including in the definition of actual worked hours is any approved and scheduled, any scheduled and approved. It has to be both vacation leave and personal leave to count. So if someone's on vacation and they get called back, any hours over that 204, the vacation hours and personal leave hours that were approved and scheduled count towards those 204 hours. So then any callback would be over those hours.
So is that a change to current, I mean, right now, is
Yes.
callback overtime
Yeah.
paid the same way as overtime?
Right now, it's a change because callback overtime would be anytime you're called back outside of your schedule.
And how much money, y'all estimated previously, how much money the city would save by doing it this way? And I think it was like,
Well, if we just did hours actually worked, it would be approximately, at the time, the figures looked to be about $1 million.
and
I haven't done this goes, the savings on this would be less than $1 million, obviously, because now we're saying that scheduled and approved leave, vacation leave and personal leave
will not count as hours worked for determining.
will count, the scheduled and approved will count as hours worked. Any kind of unscheduled deal will, obviously sick leave is taken, when you need it. That's not necessarily, that doesn't have to be scheduled and approved.
I see what you're saying.
What about comp time?
What, how does that comp time work? Comp time's usually,
It's scheduled.
Well, it's not.
it's a
addressed.
you have to
Okay.
schedule, get it scheduled and approved.
Do y'all
Right.
get comp time for overtime?
Frank's getting it right now.
There are some instances where you do get comp time.
Yeah, very few.
Okay. Okay.
When you
So
schedule.
the change is that sick leave and
Any
unscheduled
right.
vacation or personal leave and Kelly days already don't count as actual hours work, do they?
No. Oh, they do?
they shouldn't.
they
It's not
don't.
Kelly Day if they do. We've been through this before.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And it's pretty hard to take, as I understand
But the
it.
formula is the same and
The
everything?
formula is the same, everything, on the formula, I just added not on the formula, but on the language on section 5B, which is the overtime for callbacks, to just say that firefighters receive overtime pay for hours actually worked as described in section 2 of this article, so that hours actually worked is defined in that section 2 of the article. And I did that in section 5B and section 6 because it also applies for overtime with regards to 40-hour firefighters. So I need to send you an updated on.
Okay. So that's Article
Article
12.
13.
The next one is?
Article 10 and 11, I think they're both on the same document.
Mhm.
Base wages, there might be a couple of things I forgot to tweak on here, but I'll go through it on the supplemental page. But on the base wages, what we did is we left what we had on the table, but we just shifted the years so that for 6 months, as soon as if this agreement is ratified, say assuming April, for 6 months the firefighters would get a 1.5 bump. 1.5 bump on their base pay, and then on October 1st, 2016, you get 1%. October 1st, 2017, you get 1%. October 1st, 2018, you get 1%. And October 1st, 2019, you get 1%. That would bring the contract, basically, just kind of shifted a year, and it bring the contract to close in 2020.
And what, I mean, what, I understand what you're saying. Why are you, but why are you adding that last year? I mean, why couldn't it just be 1.5111 over a 4-year contract?
Because we had already placed that money on the table, and we didn't wanna take it away. We'd already promised you 1.5 and then 4.1% increases. And I thought that, a 4-year contract, basically it'd be a 4.5-year contract. And that's the only reason that we're asking to amend, the duration clause is just based on what the wage proposal is.
So are you saying that if we wanted to just do a 1.5 and then 3 ones and leave the duration as is, that would be a problem, or that would not be a problem? You might be willing to do that?
That might be a problem. I don't know if we'd be willing to do
It's
that.
a 5-year contract.
And that's my question. I mean, why? Is this an economic situation? I mean, the numbers don't work. I mean, why are we adding an extra year here? I mean, other employees got a 1.5% increase
No.
in
Nobody-
October of 2014?
No, nobody got anything in 2015.
Okay. But
I believe it was 2014 that it was 1.5%.
And that was across the board, everybody except firefighters?
I believe so.
Okay.
And police.
Police got 4% that year.
Oh, I'm sorry, they had that contract, you're right.
Yeah.
Mhm. but the 1.5 wasn't across the board to them.
It's easy to compare.
And, the police, I've got a copy of their contract, but it expires in 2019 or 2020.
Let me look.
I can,
I have to look that up. I think I have it right here.
okay.
Yeah, I believe it expires 2019. Yeah, September 30th, 2019.
Okay. So the effect of this is to extend our contract 1 year longer than theirs, their recent
That
contract.
would be in effect, yes.
Okay, okay. What's next?
And theirs was a 4-year contract as well.
Can I just say something? Yeah, everybody keeps forgetting about 2015. This right here is a 5-year contract.
It's a 4.5-year contract. It becomes in effect at the
The last
time
one
of
finished
ratification.
in 2014. So I was just completely skipping over 2015, which would be considered a 0%.
John, we understand the point you're making. Okay. So next is,
Article 11, the supplemental pays. All
Okay.
of that is the same, except for I forgot on, and I'll clarify this for you, on section B, assignment pay, the hazmat, I need to shift those year because, the hazmat, where is it?
it's at the
On
bottom
A
of
and
page
B,
3.
basically the certification pay for certified paramedic and the hazmat pay are supposed to start in year 3 of the contract, or actually the full year, it would start, there would be a shift in the year, it'd go 1 year further.
Okay.
So I need to clarify that.
Also, there was on the assignment pays,
I added, are you gonna talk about emergency medical service supervisor? I actually added because it has an exception, I made it I added it as section F at the very bottom
oh, okay, I see it.
of emergency medical service supervisory officers, and basically this, clarifies and parallels the language that was in the old contract.
Okay,
Because there was an exception of the, assistant EMS director, and it was in lieu of paramedic certification pay, so they would get $150 per month as, as emergency medical service supervisory officers, which are normally known as 623s, am I correct on that? I think they call them 623s, so I added that in there. I was trying to do it in assignment, but it didn't quite fit, so I made its own section.
I don't remember we talked about it, but we'll talk about it on the break. And so you need to correct the hazmat pay?
Yeah, you know where the hazmat and the,
So you're just moving it back a year or something?
yeah, it's instead of 2014, 15, it's
2015.
gonna start, yeah, it starts,
Cause we're in 2015, 16
right,
right
it'll
now.
be, for hazmat for $50, it would be 2015, 16, and 2016, 17, and then $75 a month would be in the third year, 2017, so it's gonna be bumped a year. just because we're not, 2014-15 doesn't count.
Okay.
And I'll clarify that. I just forgot to make that change. And I think those were the only things, just bumping the year and then the addition of the section F.
Okay.
Okay.
So that paramedic increase drops off. Did you say that the paramedic incentive pay drops off after the 18-19 year?
Let me look. Let me pull it up. Okay, on the paramedic certification,
Correct.
it drops off. Let me see.
Cause that $100 has a,
Let me see here. It should be $100 per month, and that's gonna be for on paramedic certification, $100 per month for, it's gonna say 2017, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20.
and then what?
Then we had to negotiate a new contract. We have the pursuant to the duration clause.
I know, but look, you still.
I know.
Doesn't matter if you're part of it.
The intention is not to cut it off, is that, if that's what you're asking?
That is what I'm
Yeah, no. The intention is not to cut it off.
You won't be here.
I can ask it if you want.
Huh?
Things
Yeah.
may change.
Johnny
in 5
has a
years.
question.
What I should say is starting, I guess,
Right,
start,
that's
it's.
the starting intent.
Yeah.
Roxy, I had a question
Sure.
on your, and I don't know if it's anything anybody's really thought about, but on the ambulance duty certification pay,
Let's see,
you know how we're gonna do the tier system?
yes.
The 25, 35, and 45?
Mm-hmm.
What, we could have people that are assigned to,
That's our proposal. That's what you're talking about, right?
yeah.
He's talking about people that are injured in the line of duty. They stop getting that assignment pay because they're injured. And we had added a sentence to ours that, you know, they would get like their average of an ambulance duty over the past 6 months. And I take it y'all are rejecting that, or did you just not think about it when you?
Oh, I don't know that we,
Let me
The
show you.
problem is you're gonna have
Let me
guys
show you what
that
I'm
are-
talking about. See the blue there?
yeah. So you're talking about if somebody's on a line of duty, you wanna get their full compensation, you want that to be included in there?
Yeah,
Or-
because remember that the ambulance duty pay replaced a different form of pay that was not
Right.
based on assignment. And so we don't want them to lose that. And the idea was that they would get an average, you know, whatever their 6-month average was, that they would get that during the period, because it's not at all uncommon, you know, for people to, I mean, a pretty common injury these days is,
As
you
an
know,
example, we had a guy on
paramedics
special,
picking people up.
we had a guy on special assignment for over a year, who's a firefighter 2 assigned to the ambulance. He would have got 0 pay, 0 assignment pay for that year, even though he's a firefighter 2 assigned to the ambulance. That's his rank.
Because he got injured.
No, he
He
was
had
on
special
special
assignment.
assignment.
Oh. Well, this only covers injured in the line of duty.
And there are those circumstances where,
Happens all the time.
I mean, a long-term injury.
Yeah, but I'm saying we did, our proposal didn't address that.
Right. And
How many of these
especially-
special assignments are
Honestly,
there? Okay,
I don't know
anyway.
the answer to that.
One is special assignment, but many reasons for special assignment.
And it goes deeper than a special assignment. What do you do with a guy who's on, under our current vacation system, we have, every 10 years you get what we call a back-to-back, which is about, it's the last 2 weeks of the year and the first 2 weeks of the next year off on vacation. He would also not get any assignment pay, even though he's a firefighter 2 assigned to EMS. So the idea was for there to be a floor, a bottom, you know, something, because of the virtue of your rank, you get X, whatever that number would be. If they're no fault of their own, I mean, that was the idea.
Hmm.
I'll look at the line of duty language that you have. Any other questions?
I think we got that one down.
Okay. Okay, the next one is.
Those are just like the vagaries of going from a monthly assignment pay format to a per ride-out assignment pay format. The idea was that we were trying to create an incentive for people who were having to ride the ambulance more, but it looks like there are some unintended consequences we didn't take account of. I think that's what we're
Okay.
saying. Okay. What's next?
Article 9, association rights. Section 2, the president's time off was what's the issue in this particular article? I didn't change anything else. Section 8, upon election and in each July thereafter, the association president may choose to be relieved of duty for the following fiscal year to perform association duties. The association president will provide the fire chief with written notice of the decision within 2 weeks after election thereafter by July 20th for each subsequent fiscal year. If the association president chooses to be relieved of duty, each firefighter will donate his or her pro rata share personally that would fully cover all the salary and benefits of the association president is entitled to receive, which will continue to be paid by the city. That amount will be determined by the city upon the association president's notification to be relieved of duty.
I know y'all just negotiated the police contract. How is it handled for the police association president?
I believe it's possibly base salary.
And you also give the police association a position and a half off and only require them to compensate base salary.
I believe so.
Okay, so what is the city's basis for treating the fire union differently there?
They're trying to recoup, the city has been fully, the city has been making up a lot of the salary that was not covered by personal leave from the firefighters for several years, for quite a while.
As it has for the police. I'm just asking what
Well, I'm
is the-
talking about more than,
I don't think so. I mean, I'll go back and check. I've got the old police contract too. You're saying that
The
you were
old
treating
police
us better than
contract-
the police previously?
no, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
Don't put words in my mouth. What I'm telling you is that, number one, we're in two different sets of negotiations, okay? That's the police negotiations, we're in the fire, we're in a different situation here. We're negotiating a contract from the ground up, so every single item is an issue. And what we're trying to do is, make sure that we are covered here for the association president, because the association president, if they elect to take the time off to be a full-time association president, is working for the fire union, not the city.
And the police union president, what's he doing?
He's doing the same.
But you're not charging him full freight. You just negotiated their contract, you're not charging them full freight.
Yeah.
The only question I asked you was, what's your basis for the different treatment of the two unions?
This is a different where everything's an issue. The association president's time just never came to the table by either side on that, in that negotiation. We're talking about every single aspect of this contract, and this is where it needs to be.
Well, but when you negotiated the police contract, you had the ability to do the same thing there too, and you didn't. And my question is, I mean, it's you're giving me a non-answer to the question of why the differing treatment. I mean, we're seeing this in article after article. Police are getting more money, they're getting a new retirement benefit, Their maintenance of standards wasn't touched, their
We have
president's time wasn't
We
touched.
have more money on the table with you, with fire, than we ever did with the police.
Well, I'm sure that you'll have an opportunity to prove that. But I'm just asking you if you've got any basis for the differing treatment other than what you've already said, which is, well, we're negotiating you from the ground up, so all bets off.
We're gonna have to make it right across the board.
So you're gonna go back and reopen the police contract, or
We're
you're
not
gonna
gonna
wait till 2019?
No, we're not gonna reopen it. I mean,
So
that's
they're
gonna
gonna
be
get a
an issue
benefit
that
for 3
will
years
be
that
looked
we
at.
we're having taken from us. By the way, overtime, another issue where you didn't change their overtime compensation and you changed ours, right? Same question, why the differing treatment?
That was an issue, Craig. I've said it multiple times.
It's
that
an
the-
issue.
Well, let me tell you, this is not the police negotiation, okay? And there's two different circumstances that we're under. We're negotiating the ground up, a brand new contract.
By agreement.
Everything, right, by agreement. Everything is at issue. So we're looking at every aspect of this negotiation. I mean, when we first started this, we didn't come with, 50, 58, 60, 68 proposals for each and every issue. Just like your side did, we prioritize and we get the things that are the most important out of the way. It's a give and take by nature.
Roxy, I mean.
And you're always gonna be able, you're always gonna do that
You can talk in
because
code all you want to.
I'm not talking
But
in
basically,
code.
yeah, you are, because basically, you're taking back from the firefighters in several areas where you haven't taken back from the police. And the only difference is we were politically active and they weren't. And that has First Amendment implications. And I think you know that it does. And you have no justification for what you're doing to us except to say what you've already said in prior sessions, which is we exercised our rights. And what you're saying today, which is, well, we're negotiating from the ground up.
So the answer
I
is.
think that's gonna be pretty thin.
The answer is no, we're not punishing you, okay? No, we're not. We're looking at this from a business standpoint and trying to negotiate a fair and equitable contract for both parties. We get no benefit from the association president in terms of him being our employee.
I categorically reject that. That union president makes all kinds of public appearances that benefit both the city and the union. Cancer awareness, muscular dystrophy,
Just yesterday.
do the, what do you call it, fill the booth. All these things that they do that make both the city and the union look good. To say that you get no benefit from the president's time is an argument that I have never heard made from any other bargaining team that I've been with.
The president also takes part in COPE committee meetings and COPE funding that fund campaigns against the city as well. Does that benefit the city?
Go with that.
No, I'm just asking.
COPE that campaigns against the city. Is that what's going on here?
That's what happened, and that's factual.
And so that's the reason
So-
for the differing treatment.
No, I'm saying because there's no benefit to the city, the city does not benefit.
Okay, I hear what you said. So that's Article 9?
That's Article 9. And I believe on B, Article Section 2B, we made the reinstatement list permanent, which I believe is
Okay.
agreed.
Right, yeah.
And that was the only issue on that particular article. The next article is, are we done with that? Do you have any other questions on that?
Mhm.
The next article is Article 32. That's the appointment of deputy chiefs and assistant chiefs. And, on section 3, it's, during the term of this agreement, the fire chief may have no more than 4 appointed deputy and assistant chiefs. All other deputy and assistant chief positions will be filled by competitive examination in accordance with the CSA in this agreement. The assistant EMS director appointment is in addition to these 4 appointments.
Okay.
And then we talked about it before, Article 28 on the impasse procedure. We would like to, what's that, Article 28? On Section 1F, which are the factors affecting the fact-finding board's recommendation, we'd like to add the factor of concessions made by both parties during the collective bargaining period. And the reason that we add this is because that's the nature of collective bargaining. That's how we get to this end goal.
Mhm.
If there are proposals, tentative agreements that are made, or proposals that are made in exchange for something that one of the other parties is trying to obtain, I think that is an important factor of what the fact finder and ultimately the arbitrators are going to need to look at. And of course, both parties can put evidence with regard to that.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
Mhm.
And then, Article 4 was duration, just in conjunction with our, wage. Article 10 and Article 11 proposal, the wage and the supplemental pay proposals. The only thing that we were proposing to change was just the end date from September to September 30th, 2020. All the other
Yeah.
language is exactly the same.
Yeah.
And then, of course, all the other tentative agreements.
Okay. What I need to, what I suggest we do is we take a lunch break and let us talk about this while we're on the lunch break. What I want to ask you all to think about and to consult with whoever you need to consult with, I would like, I know you said this is your last best offer. I would like to bring an FMCS mediator in to these negotiations to help us. I think with the exception of Article 33, the rest of the stuff that's in here is stuff that we probably could work out. I don't know whether we can get there on 33 or not. But I do think that that's a possibility. I have talked to the new FMCS mediator. It's a person that y'all have not met. Her name is Kathy Stevens. Ms. Stevens has told me that she would be willing to come down and have a meeting with the city manager, you, me, and Johnny, where we could interview her and talk to her and see whether we think she might prove helpful. I think that that's something that we should explore and ask you to think about that over the lunch break. I also ask you, I mean, if the decision is no, and this really is our last best final offer, I ask you to consider whether or not the city would be willing to utilize the newly negotiated, assuming we added this concessions language, which I think we would be willing to do. If we added that, whether you would be willing to use that impasse procedure to resolve this bargaining impasse. And I'm not asking you to buy a pig in a poke. I would tell you what I would give you our final proposals, and then so that you'll know what sets of proposals we're working from. Okay? I think our proposals would be quite close, with the exception of Article 33, where we still have some remaining differences. But it seems to me that that is a procedure that the two parties have negotiated together, and it seems to me that that is a viable solution for getting past this bargaining impasse. And then, to the extent that you have the more reasonable position, you ultimately would prevail. So think about those two things. If depending on what you say to those two things, I have some other suggestions as well. But I want to get your reaction to those two things first.
Okay. I'm not so sure that I can have the response and reaction to that today because those are pretty big issues.
The meeting with the FMCS mediator, it seems to me, is kind of like a no-brainer. I mean, what does it hurt to talk to her to see if we think she can help? But I understand that utilizing the negotiated impasse procedure is a decision that you may need to think long and hard about. I'm not looking for a decision necessarily today, but certainly you and I can talk on the phone after today.
Absolutely.
And as we figure out, what our next steps will be.
Absolutely. Okay, so, do you want to, are you gonna look over the proposals? Are there gonna be any more questions that you think we need to come back to the table to talk about? Or is it something that we can?
Well, I would like to, I guess, schedule a next meeting. Whether or not we'll have a next meeting, I guess we don't know at this point, but I'd like to go ahead and schedule it.
Okay.
So we'll at least have it on the books in case that's, and
Sure.
then you and I can talk about these two things.
Okay.
Unless, give me 5 minutes with my team to make sure they don't have questions that I haven't asked.
Right, and I'm not opposed to the next
Johnny is-
meeting.
I'm sorry. Johnny is telling me that we lost a member of our team, and so we need to make a couple of replacements to our team. Justin Miller, we lost, and what happened to Carrie?
I just wanna remove it.
We're gonna need to replace Justin Miller, so
See an alternate?
Mhm.
Okay.
Justin's an alternate.
And Carrie's an
Just-
alternate also?
They're both alternates.
Yeah, and so we're gonna replace them.
So just pursuant to our ground rules, just submit it in writing, just
Okay.
follow that letter. We have, just so that y'all know, we've had changes in our team. Susan Thorpe has left the city, but we're just utilizing our
Where'd she go?
alternates. She went to Yuma, Arizona. Mhm.
Okay. Do y'all have a council meeting on March 22nd?
Let me look at that. I believe so. Is it a workshop?
Yes, it's a city council retreat.
Yeah, retreat.
Oh, so that's not a public meeting?
It is a public.
Oh, it is?
Well,
The retreat, but are we gonna have
The reason I'm
executive session and
asking
all
is,
that stuff?
I wanna have a meeting, I wanna suggest that as our next meeting day, but, are y'all available, or are some of y'all gonna be on the retreat?
I'm available. I need to check with my team to see, because I do have some, critical people here on the team that may be part of that retreat.
Okay.
So, but we may be able to work it out. I need to check on that.
Yeah, okay, let's both think about that day.
Okay, March
Another
22nd?
alternative might be the 21st.
Okay.
Hmm? Oh, yeah.
I know.
So, if in fact there is no point in further meeting, a critical decision that we're gonna need to make on our team is whether or not we're gonna put the city's last offer to the membership for a vote. Okay?
I understand.
If we do that, then we would want to continue the bargaining period to accommodate that vote, and then start the mediation impasse process, the contractual mediation impasse process after that date, assuming that the contract was not accepted. Of course, the contract's accepted, all the rest of it becomes moot, but.
Okay.
So, okey-doke, anything else, guys, that we need to talk about today?
We're coming back after lunch.
Are we coming back after lunch?
It's if you have any questions. I've presented everything that I have today.
Yeah, maybe some questions coming up over lunch.
Why don't we get back briefly after lunch?
Okay.
Say, I've got like 1:20 now, why don't we meet back here at like 2:30? Will that give y'all enough
I
time?
think so.
Okay. Very good. The only questions that I have relate to this Article 33 Emergency Medical Service.
Okay.
I'm hoping that you'll maybe do some of this as like not asking you to rewrite the proposal, but just as clarifications of what I think was intended
Sure.
by the proposal. The first is, we're unclear about whether once you make firefighter 2 driver, captain, and above, whether or not the certification requirement, the lifelong certification requirement, continues to apply to them.
I think the intention is, yes, I think it's gonna apply to the entire rank and file.
Okay.
But-
So,
so-
even though they wouldn't have like a service requirement, they still have a certification requirement?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they won't be required to ride under the ambulance duty provision, but they will have the paramedic certification requirement.
Okay.
So you'll need me to clarify that.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I don't know that you need to clarify that, because that's the way we understood the
Okay.
language to. Now, the, second thing is, you know, we would like you to make it explicit somewhere in the article what you said was the intent, which is that if you've already stepped down, in other words, you've already given up your certification, that this wouldn't apply to you. We do have a
Okay.
few people in that category, and we just want to make sure that this can't be read in such a way that, you know, because they won't have done 16 years, that they would have to, you know, recertify or something like that.
Okay.
We would urge you to look at that 90-day requirement. We think that in a lot of cases that's going to be very difficult. You know, if you got to make up your hours, and then that you have to maybe do some, you know, what do you call it? Where you're actually ride outs.
Yeah, you gotta do your clinical hours or your skills.
Yeah, in scheduling all that, it may be difficult, if not impossible, to get that done in 90 days. I think, you know, the point that you're trying to make is you want them to recertify expeditiously. But the most common situation where
Right.
somebody loses certification is they just get behind in their CEs for whatever reason.
See,
And-
yeah, and I was kind of going status quo with what the old contract said, and then I confirmed when we were discussing the new credential class requirements, I did talk to them about the recertification process, and they told me that the 90 days was a sufficient amount of time, but I'll recheck that, re-clarify, and ask those
Yeah,
questions.
because, I mean, adding 30 days or something like that, you know, the idea is to make them recertify expeditiously, but not necessarily
Okay.
to create an
And go
impediment.
over those factors that you're talking about so that I make sure I have them in my notes and
There's
it's ride outs.
testing scheduling,
Uh-huh.
there's hours you have to accrue, you know, because if you didn't do your CE hours, which is why you probably lost your certification, you have to go back and do all those hours. That's 144 hours. And a lot of times you can only do so many per day.
Right.
So that may stretch it out.
Okay.
And just the testing schedule, whether it's here locally or in other cities.
Okay.
You may have to do some traveling. As if there's openings in those cities as well. Those are some of the things that have come up in the
Okay.
past.
All right, I'll ask about that. The intent is not to contract people out for, you know, so if that needs to be clarified and moved, I'll find out, I'll talk to y'all about it, and we'll come up with that. But it's so that it doesn't linger on for too long, so
Right.
that then they're required to do so much more and actually redo the academy and all that other stuff.
Right.
So, okay.
We would ask you to consider putting that good faith component into the grievance, you know.
Okay.
A bad faith exception for those grievances on staffing needs, et cetera. And did you, get a chance, by any chance, to look and see how many people were hired in that 9-month period, January to September?
I did not.
Okay.
I sent out, I put my note, and I think I thought I sent out an email, but I don't know if it went out
Okay.
of my outbox. So it was that January 1st, 2006 to, September 30th, 2006, right?
Yeah.
That should be a pretty easy number to get.
Yeah. And I think those are our questions. I don't suppose you had a chance to get us any feedback on the two that.
I did not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm working on that. And if you have any additional questions, because I know there may be some more that come up, feel free to email them to me in writing, and I'll get you responses ASAP.
Okay.
Okay?
I think everything else is more or less understandable. I still do think that, with the exception of EMS, we're close. I hate to see us drawing a line in the dust at this point, but if that's what it has to be, that's what it has to be. But then those two questions become important. Would getting a mediator in here, you know, because as I read the, let's assume worst case scenario, this is your last proposal and our troops vote it down, let's say. Then we're going to, then, you know, the question is, you know, are we gonna go to the old impasse procedure, the new impasse procedure? And the old impasse procedure calls for us to get a mediator for 2 weeks from AAA, which we'll end up paying a fee for.
Right.
And they won't have the kind of expertise that the FMCS mediators do, because the FMCS mediators is exactly what they're trained to do. So it makes sense to me to get an FMCS mediator in, and if it, you know, I don't know what the issues have been in the past with the FMCS mediators, but I think you, like me, have always used Mike McMillian. There is a new person that Mike has retired, and so it seems to me it would behoove us to at least meet her and see if, you know, she might. I've already attended a training in another bargaining unit that she did, and she seemed, you know, and I think, in fact, I sent you her resume.
You did send me her resume.
So you know, she's got a lot of experience on the West Coast. So, any rate, unless anybody else has any other questions, I think that's what we want to urge you to do. If you know, this is it, then you know, I do think it's probably going to end up in one or the other of the impasse procedures. And I would really, and for that reason, I mean, we spent a lot of time negotiating the impasse procedure. So I would urge y'all to consider using that to resolve this impasse. You know, then I mean, that's a way to avoid, you know, a lot more entanglement, you know, in the courts and that sort of thing, which I'm sure we all want to avoid if possible. So.
Okay.
Okay.
And then we'll look at March either 21st or 22nd, because I have to find out if I have my team available on the 22nd, and we'll use the 21st as a backup date.
Okay. Okay. Very good.
Okay.
Thank y'all.
I'll be talking to you.
You
Okay,
bet.
thank you.